The House Select Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack sends out a slew of new subpoenas. They went out to at least 6 former administration and campaign aides who supported President Trump's effort to overturn the 2020 election. The question is, will they comply with the committee's investigation? Plus, President Biden and members of his cabinet are ramping up efforts to promote the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The question is, will they get their message across to voters? And after more than 18 months, the United States lifts travel restrictions that kept families separated due to the pandemic. The question is the U.S. about to see a major uptick in international travel? It's way too early for this. Good morning, and welcome to Way Too Early, the show that, let's be honest, wouldn't mind a trip overseas. I'm Jonathan Lemire on this Tuesday, November 9th. We'll start with the news. The House Select Committee investigating the Capitol insurrection has issued 6 new subpoenas for former Trump advisors. Attorney John Eastman, 2020 campaign manager Bill Stepien, campaign advisor Jason Miller, former NYPD Commissioner Bernie Kerik, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, and campaign executive assistant Angela McCollum. They were all ordered to testify and provide relative documents to the committee. All 6 took part in discussions about challenging the 2020 election results, according to the Washington Post. Eastman and Kerik reportedly participated in the so-called war room meetings at the Willard Hotel, just a few blocks from the White House. They plotted ways to prevent the certification of Electoral College votes on January 6th. Eastman, of course, also penned a 2-page memo for the Trump team, where he claimed former Vice President Mike Pence had the legal authority to block the counting of votes. The January 6th committee previously issued subpoenas for top Trump advisors, including Steve Bannon, who the House voted to hold in contempt after he refused to testify. The decision over whether to bring charges against Bannon now sits with Attorney General Merrick Garland. NBC News has reached out to all 6 individuals subpoenaed yesterday, looking for responses. Not heard back. In his new book, Betrayal, the Final Act of the Trump Show, ABC News chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl describes a conversation former President Trump had with the head of the RNC on his last day in office. According to Karl, Trump told RNC chairwoman Ronna McDaniel he was leaving the GOP and creating his own political party, and that he didn't care if the move would destroy the Republican Party. Trump reportedly told McDaniel, quote, "This is what Republicans deserve for not sticking up for me." Karl writes that McDaniel and her leadership team made it clear that if Trump followed through with his threat, the party would immediately stop paying his legal bills incurred during post-election challenges. But perhaps more significantly, the RNC threatened to render his most valuable political asset worthless, his campaign's list of email addresses for 40 million Trump supporters. Trump generated money by renting the list out to candidates at a steep cost. Officials estimated that it was worth about $100 million. 5 days after that conversation with McDaniel, Trump ultimately backed down. Meanwhile, on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert last night, Jonathan Karl also discussed photos he saw from January 6th.
Okay, so I found out that during the riot, Mike Pence had with him the entire time a photographer, an official White House photographer. I got a hold of the photographer. I actually saw all of the photographs.
You saw?
I saw all the photographs. And by the way, it is wild to see that he was in a loading dock in an underground parking garage beneath the Capitol complex. No place to sit, no desk, no chairs, no nothing. He was in this concrete, parking garage. And, with his family and, this is the Vice President of the United States, and he's holed up in a basement. And I went to the Vice President, the former Vice President, and I asked him if I could publish those photographs. They refused to let me publish the photographs. But I have a suspicion that the January 6th committee is going to want to see those photos.
Joining us now, congressional reporter for the Washington Post, Mariano Sotomayor. Mariana, good morning. Thank you so much for being here. Let's start with this. The House committee, obviously, expanding its investigation dramatically. Talk to us, if you will, about the significance of these subpoenas, if there's any sense as to whether there'll be compliance, and what the next steps might be.
Yeah, thinking about what this committee is doing, they're acting very quickly. We've seen dozens of subpoenas already to Trump officials, those who did organize that Stop the Steal rally. And now you're seeing this new batch, as you've mentioned, those 6 currently on your screen. And the reason why they have all been subpoenaed together is because they did play a major role in early January to try and pressure a number of states that we have since seen try and really undermine Joe Biden's presidency. There are a number of those people who really made calls, especially John Eastman, who you're seeing now on the screen. He is someone who laid out a strategy and trying to convince other Trump officials that, yes, Pence could overturn the election, even though we know that is not true, and really urge others to reach out to state legislatures in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Arizona, try and convince people directly that to at least either delay, if they couldn't deny Joe Biden his presidency, and also make sure that those who could cast those electoral ballots just try and sow more doubt ahead of Inauguration Day. So they are very critical to this committee, the committee definitely wanting to get to the bottom as quickly as possible to try and talk to all these people. And so far, they've been asking for at least those batch of 6 to turn over documents and come before the committee the next several weeks. As far as we know, most others have also been complying. But Jeffrey Clark, who was in another batch of subpoenas, he's a former DOJ official. He did turn up to talk to the committee last week, but didn't say much. And, Chairman Benny Thompson has said, that they're going to try and take next steps to try and compel that testimony. Hasn't gone so far yet to say anything about, contempt of Congress, but we have seen that happen already before.
Yeah, and certainly these are some pretty important names in the Trump inner circle. Bill Stepien, the campaign manager. Jason Miller, his top political advisor, still very much in the Trump orbit right now. Michael Flynn, of course, national security advisor, who has, shall we say, some questionable associations in the conspiracy world. And then, obviously, Bernie Kerik is someone who is very tight with Rudy Giuliani. So these will be important matters to watch. Mariana, let's switch back to legislation now and the Build Back Better Act. Obviously, the president notched a significant win last week when the bipartisan deal was passed. We expect a signing ceremony any day now. But this is only part one. They still have to do the larger reconciliation package. What's the mood right now? Congress, of course, is out this week, but I know you're talking to people. Is there a sense that could we really expect a vote next week? How much twists and turns do you think we still have to go here?
Yeah, I would say the mood right now on Capitol Hill is a lot of people are catching up on sleep and trying to regain their energies after the last 3 weeks. And you said it. So many twists and turns. Literally, if you ask staffers, even members, some hours you thought, okay, this is definitely going to pass, both the infrastructure bill and Build Back Better. An hour later, it was in question again whether that would pass. So that is really the sense going into next week. They have a lot of people having already lived through that back and forth, but really the expectation and what's going to tell us if the House is going to move to pass that bill is, a lot of those 6, they're just 6 moderate members who are waiting for that CBO score. It's a scoring by the Congressional Budget Office. They really are hoping that this $1.75 trillion bill is not just paid for, but also doesn't add to the deficit. And so far, partial scorings and such have shown that that will be the case. But progressives really hoping that that score is very clear and, because that is going to be really at the crux of potential negotiations. Policies already ironed out. None of that is going to change. But that is really what those 6 moderates who were holdouts last week need to vote and support this bill. Of course, the president basically gave assurances to moderates and progressives saying that if that scoring comes back and let's say that the top line number can get a little fuzzy, well, he's going to work to make sure that those revenues are there and that it is paid for so that at least the House can vote and send it off to the Senate where it faces even more hurdles.
Yeah, we've got a long way to go. The Washington Post, Mariana Sotomayor, we really appreciate you being here. We'll see you again soon. We turn now to Texas, where a criminal investigation is underway into a deadly crowd surge at a musical festival for popular rapper Travis Scott. 8 people, including a 14-year-old boy, have died. Now both Scott and the concert organizer are facing multiple civil lawsuits as families for the victims call for justice. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky has the latest from Houston.
From packed concert to pandemonium, the FBI now joining a massive investigation into how Travis Scott's Astroworld Music Festival turned deadly Friday night. The 8 victims killed under the age of 30, the youngest just 14 years old. All caught in a sea of nearly 50,000 fans pushing towards Scott.
You couldn't breathe. I'm talking about everybody was so crushed up on you.
The crowd surge so crushing. Witnesses say it knocked fans unconscious before being trampled.
Everyone was pushing to the front. You had no room to walk.
Some so desperate, they climbed onto the stage shouting for help.
We need somebody to help him. Somebody passed out right here.
Despite several pauses, authorities worked to shut the show down for almost 45 minutes before it ended. Scott and organizers criticized for not stopping sooner. Crews rushed 25 people to hospitals. At the scene, hundreds overwhelmed medical staff. Some fans even appearing to dance on top of rescue vehicles. Houston's police chief saying he met with both Scott and security moments before he took the stage, quote, to share his concerns regarding public safety. After the show, Scott sharing this to Instagram.
I'm honestly just devastated, and I could never imagine anything like this just happening.
Scott's partner, Kylie Jenner, who was at the concert, says they weren't aware of any deaths until later and are now pledging to pay for all of the funerals, some of which have already begun.
You go to a concert to have fun. You don't go to a concert to die.
The family of 27-year-old Danish Beg saying he died saving his fiancée from being crushed.
My brother was trying to save her, and he did. He saved her, and it cost him his life.
The family of Axel Acosta demanding large concerts be made safer.
I wish I could have gone with him, and I pray that he's okay and he's in a better place.
And we'll have a live report from Houston coming up on Morning Joe. Still ahead, the wait is over. Families separated for months because of COVID travel restrictions reunite at airports across the country. Plus, former President Barack Obama tries to convince European allies that America is serious about combating climate change. His message to world leaders at the U.S. summit in Scotland. Those stories and much more when we come right back.
These days, the news never stops. The morning's headlines change by afternoon, and by the end of the day, it's all totally different. So let's get into it. What's happening right now, what it all means for you for an hour every day. I get it. I know that it can be hard to keep up. So let's get started together and go from there.
Hey, I'm Hallie Jackson, and we have a ton going on tonight. Here's the deal.
Hallie Jackson Now premieres Monday at 5 on NBC News Now.
Everybody, it's Hoda Kotb and Jenna Bush Hager, and we got big news, y'all. Our show is now a podcast.
That's right. You can take us anywhere you go, in your car, to the gym, even just at home on your own couch with a glass of wine.
We like spending time with each other, and now we love that we can spend even more time with you. Are you sick of us yet?
Don't be, because you can never have to miss a moment of fun, laughs, or friendship.
Yeah, subscribe. Listen to Today with Hoda and Jenna wherever you get your podcasts.
The Biden administration faces an ongoing challenge as it fights a federal appeals court to remove a temporary block on its vaccine mandate for large private employers. The appeals court issued a brief order on Saturday temporarily blocking the rule. The court said the objections raised by the challengers gave cause to believe there are grave statutory and constitutional issues with the mandate. In response, the Justice Department filed a court brief last night warning that maintaining the stay would, quote, endanger many thousands of people. The DOJ also said there was no need for an emergency order to block the rule because none of it becomes effective for at least a month. Meanwhile, the November 22nd deadline for federal employees to show proof of full vaccination status is fast approaching. Under President Biden's sweeping mandate, government workers had until yesterday to get their final shot against COVID-19. But there is still significant resistance across the U.S. While high percentages of federal workers have been vaccinated, the Washington Post reports that tens of thousands of holdouts have requested exemptions on religious grounds. Meanwhile, there were emotional reunions at airports across the country as the U.S. reopened its borders to vaccinated travelers yesterday for the first time in nearly 20 months. The ban that was imposed in March 2020 closed the U.S. to millions of people, and it cost the global travel industry hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello has the details.
Oh, my
my God. At airports nationwide, hugs, tears, and laughter as Americans reunited with family and friends. A 2-year wait for Jill and Mark Chambers in London.
Now it's the Christmas selection boxes, especially that English people get.
Who spent the weekend packing to see her sister in Connecticut.
Absolutely been the most hardest thing I've ever done. I have missed my sister so much, and her children and her husband, and it's just been devastating.
It was January 2020 when President Trump shut down most flights from China to contain COVID. The travel ban then quickly expanded. But with vaccination rates rising, the White House today reopened U.S. borders to nationals from 33 countries. But to travel to the U.S., most adult travelers must provide proof to the airlines that they are fully vaccinated and provide a negative COVID test taken within 3 days of departure. Heavy traffic at both the Canadian and Mexican borders, vaccines required, but no tests. Overseas, airlines reported mostly full flights to the U.S.
We've seen searches increase 340% for travel to the U.S., which is absolutely massive.
Hopper.com reports the most in-demand U.S. destinations for foreigners, New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. Domestic airline ticket prices expected to move higher in the weeks and months ahead. At JFK Airport, Mark and Jill Chambers finally reunited with their American family.
I just kept crying on the plane because I knew I was going to see my sister. And it's been absolutely overwhelming, a whirlwind for a week. And we're here now. Oh my God, I love you so much.
Happiness replacing heartache as America reopens to the world. Tom Costello, NBC News at Denver International Airport.
Our thanks to Tom Costello, and some really emotional, beautiful scenes there across the country. Still ahead, the insurance company State Farm is standing by quarterback Aaron Rodgers in the wake of his COVID vaccine comments, but it seems his commercials aren't getting nearly as much airtime. Plus, the Milwaukee Bucks celebrate their NBA championship with a visit to the White House. Giannis is a lot taller than President Biden. Sports next.
Hey guys, it's Hoda from the Today Show. I cannot wait to tell you about my new podcast. It's called Making Space with Hoda Kotb, and I invite you to join me as we make space for incredibly uplifting stories from inspiring guests. Some you may know, others I'm so excited for you to meet. They're going to share stories of perseverance and triumph, often overcoming what once seemed impossible. So join me every week, and together we'll make space to learn, grow, and feel inspired.
Listen to Making Space with Hoda Kotb now wherever you get your podcasts.
What does her ascension mean to you?
Ask a simple question.
Everything. She is the first woman of color vice president.
Ask everyone you know what matters to them and why.
Let's be clear. This isn't about fraud.
Work the angles.
Tonight here on MSNBC, we've got a special coming up.
Question authority.
What specifically are you going to do?
Walk me through your process.
Care about what you find.
If not now, when? And if not us, the free press, then who?
And if what you discover doesn't match your expectations,
can you fact check this for us?
Keep asking yourself hard questions.
Are you confident in that?
Be tough on the answers.
It's just not true.
Favor facts over conspiracies.
What should American citizens know?
Rely on experts, not influencers.
They're now going to debate it again and vote again.
And trust standards over hearsay. At MSNBC, this is what we do, and this is who we are.
It's my body and my COVID. You know, I could give it to whoever I want. But suddenly the woke mob is coming after me. It's gotten so bad that State Farm called and they're not even offering me the Rodgers rate.
Well, that's SNL, but State Farm is not sacking Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers just yet. The insurance company is standing by its longtime pitchman despite national criticism over his comments about coronavirus vaccines. A company spokesman said yesterday, quote, "We don't support some of the statements that he has made, but we respect his right to have his own personal point of view." Adding, quote, "We encourage vaccinations, but we respect everyone's right to make a choice based on their personal circumstances." While Rodgers has appeared in State Farm commercials for the better part of the last decade, sponsorship and analytics company Apex Marketing Group reports that he was featured in just 1.5% of State Farm ads on Sunday, down from 25% the previous 2 Sundays. Get ready for a lot more Patrick Mahomes in those ads, I guess. Now to the action on the gridiron. The Steelers hosting the Bears on Monday Night Football. In Pittsburgh, 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns put the Bears ahead of the Steelers by a point, even though they entered the fourth quarter down 20-6. But each Chicago score answered by a Pittsburgh field goal, including a go-ahead kick with less than 30 seconds to play. The Bears got one last chance for the win, but the 65-year-old field goal, which we'll see in a second, it fell short of the goalpost. In a game with some, let's just how we say, questionable officiating, the Steelers win 29-27. There he is, missed. For the first time since 2016, the NBA champions visited the White House yesterday. The Milwaukee Bucks, hosted by President Biden, renewing a tradition that was put on hold during Donald Trump's presidency. Prior to yesterday's event, the Cleveland Cavaliers were the last NBA championship team to visit the White House when they were hosted by then President Barack Obama. Now for some of the action on the court last night. We begin in Memphis, and the Timberwolves trailing the Grizzlies in the final seconds of regulation.
Here we go, 1.1. Towns for the tie.
Oh my
Banked it in.
But did he call glass? Minnesota's Karl Anthony Towns drains the three-pointer at the buzzer, banking it in to send the game to overtime. But despite his heroics, the Grizzlies outlasted the T-Wolves in the extra period. Memphis wins 125-118. To San Francisco, Steph Curry scored Golden State's first 13 points last night, going on to finish with a season-high 50. He added 10 assists in a 127-113 win over the Atlanta Hawks. The Warriors, led by Curry, improved to a league-best 9-1 on the season and have opened up a bit of a lead out there on the struggling Lakers. And in Denver, Nuggets star Nikola Jokic is facing a likely suspension after that cheap shot, which earned him an immediate ejection in the final minutes of a blowout win over the Miami Heat last night. Okay, that can't be doing that. Jokic, the reigning league MVP, responded to a hard foul from Miami's Markieff Morris by charging into Morris with his shoulder, leaving him injured on the floor. A stretcher was rolled onto the court for Morris, but the veteran forward eventually left under his own power. And finally, we turn to the NHL, to the ice of the nation's capital. A second-period goal scored by Washington's Alex Ovechkin helps the Caps to a 5-3 win over the Buffalo Sabres. And it moves Ovechkin into a tie for number 4 on the league's all-time goals list with 741 now on his career. And just looking at the math here, he's got an outside shot at something that would have been considered unbreakable, Wayne Gretzky's career goals list. He'd still need to play 3, 4, even maybe 5 more seasons, depending on the goals. But at least it's a non-zero chance, and that in itself is remarkable and a testament to his career. Still ahead, the Biden administration is coming up with a strategy for promoting the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We'll talk to NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli about that. Plus, Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger will be my guest. But before we go to break, we want to know, why are you awake? Email your reasons to waytooearly@msnbc.com or tweet me at John Lemire. Be sure to use the hashtag #WayTooEarly. We'll read our favorite answers later in the show. Welcome back to Way Too Early. It's 5:30 on the East Coast, 2:30 out west. I'm Jonathan Lemire. President Biden has a victory in hand after Friday night's passage of a $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill. But in some ways, he's still facing an uphill battle. NBC News correspondent Garrett Haight reports.
President Biden celebrating 2 victories at the White House, the Milwaukee Bucks NBA championship and the bipartisan infrastructure bill he hopes will be a political slam dunk.
Are you feeling momentum?
I'm always optimistic. It's going to be a tough fight. It ain't over yet, as they say, as the old expression goes, but I feel good.
The motion is adopted.
The late Friday vote a possible turning point for the president, who saw Democrats lose the governorship in Virginia last week and his own approval slide to a new low. Democrats now trying to bounce out of a week they hope was rock bottom, with a packed month ahead in Congress. The House plans to vote on the president's $1.75 trillion climate and family care bill the week of November 15th, sending it to the Senate. Both chambers must pass bills to fund the government to avoid a shutdown by December 3rd, and Congress expects to have to raise the debt ceiling again before year's end or face default. Republicans focused on opposing the larger spending bill.
The American people basically said last Tuesday, stop. Enough is enough.
That bill now the Democrats' top priority, with no margin for error left. How concerned are you, or what's your feeling about the political prognosis there?
I am so confident, and I'm excited, quite frankly, that Democrats, when we're in the majority, this is what we do. We deliver for the American people.
The Biden administration is ramping up efforts to promote that bipartisan infrastructure bill. A White House memo lays out the plan. President Biden will lead, followed by key cabinet members, including Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who appeared in the White House briefing room yesterday, and Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm. The president's schedule shows he will hold a cabinet meeting on Friday to discuss how to best explain the bill to the American people. The schedule does not yet include a signing ceremony for the bill. Principal Deputy Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was asked about the holdup at yesterday's press briefing.
For so long, you and President Biden have talked about the urgency of passing this bill. Now it's passed. So why is he waiting to sign it? And when will he sign it?
So he talked about this on Saturday. He basically said he wants to make sure the congressional members who worked very, very hard on this, when they come back, then we'll figure out a time to sign it. But you're right, it's urgent. But we also want to make sure that the people who spent the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, just all in delivering on this promise are here for the signing as well.
Congress, of course, is out of session this week. Joining us now, someone who is here. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memley. Mike, good morning. Great to see you. Let's talk a little bit about where things need to go. And the president and his team faced a lot of criticism earlier this year that they didn't do enough to sell these bills. First of all, the COVID relief bill, which was passed back in the spring, they didn't push that one enough. And now, even here, they didn't explain to the American public as much as to what was in these measures and why, frankly, how popular they are. So we know the president's off to Baltimore tomorrow, but that's just the first step. Walk us through their plan here to really sell this bill to the American people and, I assume, lead pressure to Democrats to get the next piece done, too.
Yeah, that's exactly right, John. There is an urgency to pass the bill, and then there's going to be an urgency to celebrate what was a desperately needed victory for the Biden administration. That's why they're going to wait and have a big party, potentially at the White House, potentially elsewhere next week when the president can sign that into law. And then it gets to the important sales job for the administration. And I think you look back and you see Pete Buttigieg in the briefing room yesterday. You think back to the campaign. You know, he was seen as one of the best messengers in the party with a very bright future. And so some people were surprised when Buttigieg got named as transportation secretary, not typically one of the marquee cabinet positions. Well, in a Biden administration, transportation is probably the marquee cabinet position. And we saw in this memo from the White House yesterday, he's really going to be the tip of the spear for the administration and now trying to change the conversation away from the messy sausage making, which, by the way, isn't over yet, but into translating what this law will do for average Americans in red states, blue states, rural districts, urban districts as well. And it's not just going to be Buttigieg. It's going to be Jennifer Granholm talking about the electrical grid. It's going to be Gina Raimondo talking about expanded broadband access. Michael Regan, the EPA administrator, talking about lead pipes. When Biden was vice president, he was overseeing the implementation of the Recovery Act. He wanted to do more of a sort of road show, a victory lap, as it were. But as he put it in conversations with me over the years, President Obama was too modest, didn't want to be seen as showboating, and he had so many other priorities he needed to move on to. The Biden White House knows full well the importance of trying to translate tangible results into political results for them as well. And now we're less than a year away from the midterms. This is going to be something you're going to see the cabinet, the president, the vice president in a lot of swing districts with a lot of vulnerable Democrats touting the benefits of the bipartisan infrastructure plan.
White House aides have said to me they do expect the president's travel schedule to pick up to really sell this. But it should be noted, they've said that before and haven't always followed through. Mike, one of the most tired Washington cliches of late is the ability to, when someone says we can walk and chew gum at the same time. But I'm going to use it here because that's what they need to do. And talk to us how they can balance both selling this bill, but also making sure they can get the votes in Congress to get the bigger reconciliation package passed. We just went through the twists and turns that's still going to take. We've got a long way to go before that's over.
Yeah, and the answer to that is really, it's one and the same for the administration, because if you look back, what were the president's approval ratings in August when the Senate passed the bipartisan infrastructure plan? Above 50%. He was still fairly popular, and that was August. A week later, we were talking about the deteriorating situation in Afghanistan. I think it's hard to separate the president's approvals, slide into the upper 30s in some polls with the fact that it was a lot harder than they probably thought in the White House to get moderates still on board with the larger reconciliation plan. Democrats are going to look, they know midterm math. They know that the president's approval rating is going to have a direct relation to their chances at the polls. And so the more that the administration can get out and sell this infrastructure plan, use that as a way to try to boost the approval rating, the wrong track, right track numbers in this country, the better and the more likely it is that they're going to be there to cast what maybe was a tough vote, maybe a less tough vote if things are better. And so this is not necessarily walking and chewing gum. This is all one and the same for the administration. They know the power of momentum politically, and they're trying to desperately get momentum back after a really tough few months.
NBC's Mike Memley, we appreciate you being here. And I will just note over your shoulder, not just the model Air Force One, but the Air Force One M&Ms. I've got some of those as well. Thanks, buddy, for being
Coin
here.
of the realm.
There it is. Former President Barack Obama, meanwhile, marks the end of 4 years of active hostility toward climate science in his speech at the COP26 climate conference in Scotland yesterday. We'll show you his comments straight ahead. Way too early. We'll be right back. This week, dozens of American lawmakers will make the trip to Scotland to attend the events at the COP26 climate conference. While Democrats make up the bulk of the delegation in attendance, several Republicans will also be there. The GOP members at the summit say they hope to show climate change is a bipartisan issue. Republican Congressman John Curtis of Utah said many Republicans now want to champion the role U.S. companies and technology can play in transitioning the world to cleaner sources of energy. But as the Wall Street Journal reports, they must bolster U.S. credibility by assuring allies and business leaders that U.S. policy won't swing wildly with a new president or Congress every few years. That very point was illustrated in comments by former President Barack Obama, who did not hold back during his speech at the COP26 climate conference. Obama denounced former President Trump and Republicans for what he calls their, quote, hostility toward climate science. Take a look.
In the United States, of course, some of our progress stalled when my successor decided to unilaterally pull out of the Paris Agreement in his first year in office. I wasn't real happy about that. Despite 4 years of active hostility toward climate science coming from the very top of our federal government, the American people managed to still meet our original commitment under the Paris Agreement. And not only that, but the rest of the world stayed in the deal. And now, with President Biden and his administration rejoining the agreement, the U.S. government is once again engaged and prepared to take a leadership role.
Still ahead, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is spurned by Donald Trump over calls to move past baseless claims of voter fraud in the 2020 election. My next guest has also been pressured by the former president over those election results. Georgia's Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, he joins me ahead. You won't want to miss that. And as we go to break, a look at this date in history. 32 years ago, communist East Germany opened its borders, allowing citizens, finally, to travel freely to the West.
Good evening, live from the Berlin Wall on the most historic night in this wall's history. What you see behind me is a celebration of this new policy announced today by the East German government that now, for the first time since the wall was erected in 1961, people will be able to move through freely.
Former President Donald Trump attacked former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie in a statement yesterday after Christie called on Republicans to move past the baseless claims that the 2020 election was stolen through widespread voter fraud. It wasn't. Christie's comments came at the Republican Jewish Coalition's conference in Las Vegas, during which he urged the GOP to focus on, quote, a plan for tomorrow, not a grievance about yesterday. Trump responded by attacking the former governor's approval ratings when he left office in an interview later in the day. Christie said the former president could be a positive force for Republican candidates in the midterms if he was willing to tell the truth. Joining us now, another Republican who has urged his party to drop the lies and focus on the future, Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. He is the author of a new book, Integrity Counts. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being here. It's a fairly short list. You, Chris Christie, Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, a handful of Republicans are out there saying, look, the election in 2020, it was on the up and up. It's time to move on. What can be done, in your estimation, to get rank-and-file Republicans and other GOP leaders to agree with you?
Well, good morning. I wrote Integrity Counts to set the record straight. And so as a fact by fact, every single allegation that was made, we respond to it in this book. We did in all the court cases, and that's why we want every single court case. There's not a single pending court case from the Trump campaign. But I wrote Integrity Counts to set the record straight.
Mr. Secretary, obviously you faced an extraordinary amount of pressure from the former president during the transition after the election day, before President Biden took office. Tell us, during that, was your resolve ever waver? How did you approach this, and what was your overall message to him and his team? Walk us through that.
We just continue to lean into the truth. And the truth was that all the allegations made, none of them were supported by facts. So if you look at, they said that there was 5 or 10,000 dead people that voted. There was less than 5. They said there were 66,000 underage voters. There were 0. They said there was thousands of felons. There was less than 74. Those are 3 points right there. And we tried to get out, but we couldn't because there's 80 million Twitter followers on the other side, and we have maybe 40,000 on a good day. We were just swamped. It was a tsunami of false information. But 28,000 Georgians skipped the presidential ballot. They didn't vote for anyone. And Senator David Perdue got 20,000 more votes in Metro Atlanta and Athens than President Trump. And in the Republican congressional areas, the Republican congressmen collectively got 33,000 more votes than President Trump. Those 3 data points actually tell the whole story.
So, Mr. Secretary, obviously, one of the consequences of President Trump's baseless claims of voter fraud is he's undermined the confidence in elections among a lot of Americans, particularly Republicans. What can be done to restore that ahead of the next elections, instead of not just investigating claims of fraud? We understand that's what you and your office are doing. But how do you get ahead of these claims and try to restore Americans that when they go into the ballot box, that their vote will be counted accurately and correctly?
Well, we tell our story. Other people do. But we have a verifiable paper ballot, and we just point that out to people. When we counted all 5 million ballots, they were the same virtually as what was happened with electronic machines on Election Day. Then we did another recount with the scanned ballots, and still we got the same results. So we do that. We do investigate, and we calmly, factually let people know. But this is not our first time. When Stacey Abrams, she said she had voter suppression. President Trump said voter fraud. We pushed back on both because neither are supported by the facts. We have record registrations. We have record voter turnout. And we now have 17 days of early voting minimum throughout the entire state of Georgia. And then any county that wants to have, they can have 2 days of Sunday voting. So we continue to improve the process. But, we make sure that we are fact-based. So we know that we've got all the information on our side, and we respond respectfully to people that just spread falsehoods.
Okay. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. The new book is Integrity Counts. We'll look for that, and we really appreciate you being on this morning. Earlier in the show, we asked all of you this question. Why are you awake? Tracy writes, Mike Memley wins the tie battle today. Hold on. Is that true? Let's run a fact check. Let's see. Okay. Yep, that tie. I mean, he looks great. He always does. That's pretty good. What about mine? Can we see mine again? Green, light blue? Let's call it a tie. Get it? Kevin writes, I'm awake because in the U.S. Virgin Islands, we don't fall back in the fall. We went from watching Morning Joe at 6 a.m. to watching you at 6 a.m. So this is a benefit to these time changer. In this case, not. We appreciate the extra viewership. We'll fiddle with the clocks if we need to. Dan, what do you got back there?
We got one from Henry, who emails, I'm picking up my brother who's flying on the red eye to Miami from Hawaii, adding, I should have been an only child.
That is indeed, ever since that Seinfeld episode with Keith Hernandez, the airport pickup is sort of like the very testament of friendship, or in this case, brotherhood. Ann says this, I'm getting ready to report for jury duty, taking the subway for the first time since March 2020. Well, I've been on the subway a bunch of times, including yesterday. It's safe, it's clean, people wear masks. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, he's on Morning Joe a little later. We can ask him about it, too. And speaking of, coming up on the big show, as American lawmakers head to Scotland for the COP26 climate conference, we'll hear from the head of the Environmental Protection Agency. Plus, celebrity chef Rachel Ray joins us with a look at what she's been cooking up during the pandemic. Morning Joe, just moments away.
Whether it's the politics of climate change, the challenges of racial injustice, or the ongoing threat of the coronavirus, MSNBC Daily is here to help you better understand the issues of our time. Explore enlightening articles at msnbc.com and in a free morning newsletter sent straight to your inbox. You'll get in-depth analysis from columnists who are experts in their fields. MSNBC Daily. Visit msnbc.com to read now and to subscribe to the newsletter for free.